Okay, we're going to be moving into our presenter, and we're so pleased to have here with us today Dame Tadia Rice. Tadia has actually joined the consortium for quite a while now, but we're happy to have her as a presenter here. And I think there's also a short video that's going to be playing too from part of her award-winning Cannes Film Festival. I think it's going to be Kimmy taking over from here. Okay. Tadia, you can go ahead and begin.
I would just like to, I'm going to play the trailer for the film that I completed and then talk a little bit about it and how media and network can help all of us in our work. So first, Kimmy, why don't you go ahead and roll it? Thank you.
More than 740,000 women are in prison around the world. 200,000 of them are in the United States. In the last 40 years, the rate of female incarceration has risen by an alarming rate of 700%. The United States accounts for over 30% of incarcerated women in the world, yet has only 5% of the world's female population. Since 1970, the number of women in Hawaii prisons has increased more than 14-fold. 75% are mothers. 40% are Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders. 60% are child survivors of physical violence, mental abuse, and sexual assault. The sustained and significant rise in women's incarceration is of profound concern. Female prisoners are extremely vulnerable, with histories of poverty and trauma. The voices of women in prison are often quieted, even silenced. With determination, courage, and resilience, the inmates at the Women's Correctional Center of Hawaii wanted to speak.
Thank you very much, Kimmy, for playing that for us. This film was never intended to be made. I didn't plan on it. I didn't start out as a filmmaker. And for those of you who know me, you know that. I spent 10 years at WCCC working inside weekly with a skill set development and expressive arts program. And what I found is that the women loved expressive arts. The ACOs would say, they'd call it drama. So as I would be approaching the gate, waiting to come in, I'd hear on the speakers, drama's coming. And it's like, and they'd always say, we don't need any more drama. And it was like, I'm not bringing drama. We would put on shows during, we put on several Black History shows in January or February when we were able, and Olelo TV would come and shoot them. And the women would literally create their own shows. I would just direct them. They'd pick their music, they'd choreograph their dances, they'd decide what they wanted to have. I would give them the elements, say, what do you want to include? How do you want to enact or reenact the, excuse me one minute. Reenact the Rosa Parks arrest. And they would create out of cardboard the side of a bus, the bus in Mississippi. Out of nothing, they would create something. And they learned by doing so how to coordinate, cooperate, how to galvanize their thought, how to unify around a common purpose. All of the skill sets I was trying to impart in skill set development was made very real and much easier by using expressive arts. So I knew the value of expressive arts. The prison was surprised about it. And I think that it needs to be a permanent part of incarceration because people have to express. And if they cannot, they will only be frustrated. It's bad enough to be in prison, and it's bad enough to not be able to express what you feel, to have a healthy way to show, demonstrate, share, empathize, to share what you feel in a productive, positive way. It got to where after 10 years there, I saw the staff change. I saw counselors change, defender services change, wardens change repeatedly. And I think that the long-term women who knew me, who'd gotten to know me, and I had rotating classes, there was a level of trust that was built. They saw that the ACOs treated me like I was in prison. And there were times when I was threatened to be written up by an ACO. And for those of you who've ever been incarcerated, you know what those threats mean. And it's like, you're going to write me up. I'm a volunteer. I'm not even being paid. I come here on my own. And I would just, say, okay, no problem. So I definitely got a taste of what the women shared with me in terms of their pain, the pain that brought them there and the pain that kept them there. After a while, women would get out and they'd still want to meet with me. And because I was a volunteer, I was not allowed to meet with them, nor talk to their families, nor have any contact whatsoever. And that was very frustrating to me. I understood what the limitation was established to do, but I thought, it's like a little extreme because there has to be some continuity. So after 10 years, last year, I decided I would quit the prison, quit volunteer, and do a reentry program. I'd never done that before either. The film was never meant to be made. Leslie Matthews knows that. Kat Brady knows that. Kathy Williams knows that, because they have been involved with me over a period of time to know that that's not what I do for a living. But because my sister had come to Hawaii to visit me, we'd gotten approval one time to bring a camera into the prison. And we did these photographs of faces, and we did these very, very short interviews with the women, which then became the film. So what you saw in the trailer of the text and the narration by Maya Sotoro really is only sandwiches 5 interviews of 5 women who tell their stories in their words. And it's very compelling and empathetic because they're not bitching about prison. They're talking about what happened to them in their lives, why, which is very clear to an audience that the women suffered trauma in their lives. Trauma is what brought them to prison. Trauma is what had them create the crimes that they were convicted of. Some of them were given very harsh sentences. Some of them were given lighter sentences. There was no rhyme or reason. There was no logic. There was no logic in restitution. And what I began to observe was that there was just no logic. There was no real clarity, and there was certainly no equanimity in how the law was dispensed to the women, whether it was by the DAs, whether it was the private attorney or defense attorney, and then probation, and then parole. There was just like no firm way that the women could have an expectation or anticipate what they might see. They didn't even know when they were leaving. By the time, Ili, it was very different for you 20 years ago, because it was when I was there, the women didn't know when they'd be released. They would just one day, they'd be gone. They'd be told by an ACO, get your things, and they'd go. So I saw a lot of things when I was there. There were 5 suicides. while I was there. It was a whole nother view of what incarceration is when you're actually in the trenches and working with those who are fighting the best fight they can fight, the good fight to just stay sane in an almost insane situation. I wasn't trying to capture that in the film, but the women, when telling their stories, explained it. They exuded it. They were able to explain that to the visual audience. When we had the first screening in February at the African American Film Festival on Oahu at the Doris Duke Theater in the Honolulu Art Museum, the theater was packed, and I did not expect that at all. Leslie was on the panel with me and with 2 of the 5 women in the film, Zoe O'Brien and Momilani Cody. The film then was just a rough cut. It was like 17, 16 minutes. I don't even remember. I had in the audience senators, Supreme Court justice, lawyers, UH professors, provosts, people visiting from other states in the US who came to the art museum and saw the ad for the show that night and came back to see the show. It's a 240 seat theater and there was at least 200 full seats. There were a lot of mistakes in the film, a lot of glitches. I hadn't finished it, but I needed to see it on the big screen and I needed to make it real so I knew what to do with it. And if it was going to fall off the screen, I would know as well. There were so many former felons and women getting ready to go back into prison. And just the audience was incredibly diverse. Everybody and anybody you could imagine was there. When the film ended, we had a Q&A. Leslie, are you online? Are you with us? I saw you come in. Yes.
Aloha, I'm here. Hi,
Aloha.
Tadia.
Hi, darling. And so what happened was that the Q&A just didn't stop. The girls got a standing ovation. Women, my girls, they're my girls to me because I'm old. And the audience was just full of questions to them. Now, Leslie and I had to school the audience a bit too in our own way, but it was really Momi and Zoe who answered the questions that people asked. People, the public, of course, they have no clue what incarceration in America is like, nor what it is in Hawaii. We're a state prison and not a fed, facility. There are differences. WCCC, as we all know, is dilapidated and falling down, and it's bad. If you've ever eaten there, you know that the food is not nutritional. The beds are 3-inch thick mattresses with rusted bunk beds. It's not a pretty place. It's not a place where one can heal. And when Mark Patterson wanted to make it a pu'uhonua long ago, he really wasn't given the opportunity, and it was really a shame. But he wanted to, and it should be that. And so now what I would say is prisons should be hospitals with universities or colleges or schools in them. Because I had women who were 5th grade readers, very low literacy. I had women who were bank managers and lawyers themselves. So it cuts all the way across the economic scale, racial, ethnicity, cultural, you name it. There were generational incarceration stories. Dad was in prison, brother was in prison, cousin was in prison, mom was in prison, daughter was in prison, cousin was in prison. And it was kind of the rite of passage in these families. Everybody did time. It was okay, it was expected, because you didn't really have anything else to do. You didn't have training, you didn't have education. So poverty is the pathway to prison, period. Foster care, BIM. One of the women in the prison was in juvie since she was 12. She got pregnant at 13. She had the baby at 14. They were both wards of the state in juvie. Baby was given up. She went straight to prison when she was 18. She ran, she got back. She went in 3 times. The stories are very real, and they're not bad people's stories. There are people who didn't have a shot. A lot of them just didn't have a chance, didn't have a healthy family, were all traumatized in childhood and never could do anything about it. So The film now is 26 minutes and we still have Q&As. I recently screened it at the Hawaii State Capitol for the senators and legislatures, all to say to them, here's the real deal. If you haven't gone in, if you don't know anybody in, if you don't have any family or friends incarcerated, you don't know. And for you to be effective to do anything, you need to know. You need to have some familiarity. And, you know, sometimes I'm a bit rough on these guys, and sometimes I try to be very kind and understanding, because I came from a background where I was not very nice. I didn't want to go to prison. I didn't want to deal with these women. No, they were throwaway people in my mind. They did the crime, let them do the time. I was horrible. I was horrible. And when my dear friend, Bonnie Holcomb, who was the chaplain at Women's, nagged me, and finally I relented and went in to meet the girls, my life changed in a moment, literally transformed me meeting the women. Thereafter, I was committed. And that's kind of what it takes sometimes, is a real kind of spiritual experience, a personal experience, an experience that touches the heart and soul. And I'm very, very lucky. I was blessed to have that. And I feel so privileged to know the women I know. And when I used to approach the gates at WCCC, I was in euphoria, full joy. It was like, I'm going to church, I'm going to church. I was happy because it was my happy place with the women that I came to love and know and appreciate. So that's my story of it. And I don't want to take too much time, and I hope someone is keeping time. So I think at this point, we're all going to see the movie at the August event at the conference. Somewhere, somehow, we're going to see the movie, the full movie, and hopefully there might be time for Q&As or not. So right now is an opportunity for you to ask any questions you want. Oh, here's what I want to say. Media. The power of media is so great. Now, I knew that. I was in media and entertainment before. I knew what media did, but I'd never made a film. I have a radio show. I knew what that could do. I've been connected and I have a global network. This film won a prize from France and won a prize from Canada. Okay, it'll be shown at HIP in October. I expect it'll win something. I hope so, because it's building a consciousness about women in prison. And I only am dealing with women in prison. I can't speak to men because other than having 3 uncles who went to prison, I haven't worked with men in prison. So my kuleana is women in prison and women coming out now who need the services that Eli spoke about when we were in our breakout session. They need the support, because the fact is that within 3 years after being released from prison, if you don't have the support you need, you'll recidivate. That is what science has realized, and that's what the statistics say. So it's very serious. We're going to have a revolving door until we're able to effect change once they come out. So that's why I'm always nagging about getting them what they need before and when they come out. So please, if you would, now I'm turning it over to you. Ask me any questions you want about how this has played out. Anybody? If there's no questions.
Sorry.
Oh,
I just wanted to share just really quickly, Tadia, if I could. I think that it was so impactful to hear these women share their story. And just my biggest takeaway from being there that day was there was a young woman that was in the audience who was going to be sentenced to prison within, I think, the month, Tadia. And because the safe space was created for her, and because she was able to see women that looked like her who had been through some experiences, she stood up at the Honolulu Museum of Art with Supreme Court justices there and senators and students and everybody there. And she said, I'm going to be going to prison soon. Can somebody help connect me to resources? What advice do you have for me? So, in a lot of the breakout sessions, we've been talking about how do we get this story to people. And people from all walks of life came up and shared with her. I'm a former prosecutor, and we got to talk with her. My mom just went up and gave her a big mom hug, because sometimes we just need mom hugs. But that we can create a safe atmosphere where we can hear people share their stories, where it's not about me or Tadia, although we were there on the stage. It's about these women and their experiences, and humanizing them and getting past their number that's assigned to them, and reminding them how much they are loved, that we've all been through something. And I think Tadia even said she's like, we've all done something, and this is the lot that life has thrown them. And because of that support, because I followed that case because I'm a nerd like that, she was facing over 40 years in prison. And Tadia was able to speak at her sentencing, and some other folks were able to speak at her sentencing. And what did she end up getting? Like a couple of years?
2 years.
2 years.
2 years. And my
that's what happened.
documentary is about her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Tadia, I just want to publicly again say thank you for, this film, for sharing this film, for introducing us to Momi and Zoe. I saw them at where they work. They came up and gave me a big hug. And that for me was the transforming moment, to see this woman get up and share. And what we found out from her is she's a survivor of domestic violence, sexual violence. She's had other violent crimes happen. And so it was just really beautiful to see this woman get wrapped up in love, feel comfortable to share her story, and not stop at the film, continue on through her life. And instead of spending 40 years, because we know that prison is not going to help her, instead of spending 40 years there, she's spending 2 years. And she was concerned about finishing her degree. And because you have an educator and other folks, she's going to be able to finish her degree.
She got
so
it.
it's really beautiful.
Yeah. And might I add, it is about humanizing people. And that night was so remarkable. I mean, the film has been screened many times, but I met Kathy Williams that night, who is with us. Kathy came up to me and gave me her card and said, I have a food truck and I do training. And I said, good, let's talk. Well, now we've partnered in doing some things together in trying to take the food truck industry and make it an industry for women to run. So that's our plan. And Zoe will be heading that up because she's an entrepreneur and she's a chef. And so these women who all got culinary degrees while they were in WCCC now have an opportunity to do more than they ever thought they could, more than they ever thought they would. Now, the other thing is I'm going to LA after I screen the film in Baltimore this coming week. And I'm going to be meeting with Susan Burton. And Les, this is for you. Susan Burton was a 6-time felon. And the last time she got out, she realized there was no place to live. So somehow she got a little tiny house in South Central LA. And she had enough that she could bring in some women and their families and herself. And she got to talking to people and telling them why she needed money to buy a house. She got so much support that now she has been CNN Person of the Year. And I mean, she was going to be Vogue Woman of the Year. She's just everything. She has a lot of celebrity support and Newsom support. And the government of California is amazing. Well, she had come to the prison once and saw my girls in the show. So she knew what they got, what they did, and how I did it. So now she has a film festival. Can you believe? Small world and how things happen. So my film will be in her film festival, and I want to bring her back to Hawaii to talk to the legislature and say, here's what we did in Los Angeles. She now has 8 homes, big homes, nice homes, right? Because there are homes available and they're able to be bought under California's very generous program, which Hawaii doesn't have. But there are homes in Hawaii that we could buy. There are homes in Hawaii we could rent. So that's the point, Les. Bring her back to Hawaii. Let her do her dog and pony show. Prove what it does and the efficacy. These women don't go back to prison once they get out and have a home, and they're with their kids and they're with their families and they're free to get a job, and all the pieces come together, and they've come together how she brought them together in the most liberal progressive state in the United States. And we can do it too in Hawaii. with the political will. With the political will. So after my screening this week in Baltimore for Juneteenth, I go to LA and I'm going to be hitting up and on her coattails and trying to get money and get her back to Hawaii to help us do what we have to do. We have to do it. So I think my time is up. Is that correct, Les?
Well, actually,
we have
Tadia,
one more question from
yeah, there's a
Zena.
question in the chat for you,
Oh,
Tadia.
I'm sorry. Let's see.
And in case nobody knows, the woman that Tadia is talking about has a very famous, well-known book called Becoming Miss Burton. So if anybody ever wants to read about her story, you can look it up on Amazon. And so
And-
the question to you, Tadia, is, thank you so much for that wonderful insight. And the question is, what is in place now for the women and dealing with trauma or the social issues they have dealt with?
What can they do now? You mean the women I worked with or in general?
Just, I think in general, what do you see that is in place now for these women that are dealing with trauma and the social issues that they're dealing with as well?
What I see is that we're all working in separate silos. This organization is doing that, mine is doing this, yours is doing that, but we don't know what each other's doing. And that's why I'm trying to compile resources. Where can they get jobs? What bank is willing to help them with a credit card? Nation of Hawaii will give them a credit card. They put the money in and they have a credit card. So I'm working with Nation of Hawaii to do that. You know, what I'm doing is very different from what Kathy is doing with the food truck. Other reentry groups are doing different things. I have a 25 module curriculum for self-empowerment. There's other people doing workforce development, getting jobs, all these things, but we don't always know what each other is doing. So what the beauty of this consortium, and hats off to all of you at Going Home Hawaii, and Les, the brainchild of it, and all the participants who are working for this consolidation of effort, is that once we know what everybody is doing and where they are, we can share all of this mental power and physical energy that we're all putting into what we're doing. And that's what I see needs to happen. And now that Tommy and Kristen are in the government, thankfully, and they can actually affect a difference because they're the linchpin to all of this. We can beat our brains out and nothing will happen unless we have the participation of DPS and people like Sana and people like the POs and the various folks who are in government institutions who have power. We have a certain amount of power, but it's nothing compared to what they have. So they're very critical for us. And I think that we all do what we do and we need to keep doing it and think of new ways and join hands. I mean, I never knew Kathy Williams to the night of that screening. And now we're trying to create an industry. We're trying to buy a fleet of food trucks. We're trying to make this a business for these women. So they will be business women and not just cooks and dishwashers in restaurants, or not just aspire to be a hostess at Zippy's. You know, it's, they have to see themselves as greater and more. There's a nobility in every one of us. And we have to know this, and if no one's ever told you that, how will you know? And once we can tap on our own nobility and believe it, we can be it. It sounds trite, but it's true.
Thank you so very much, Tadia, and for all of you, really. Just one, you know, if there are any more questions, are there any more questions anybody has?
Laura Acasio has her hand up.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, Laura, go ahead.
So we're coming to the end, so I don't want to take too much time, and it's actually a huge question. Is first of all, thank you so much. And as a former state senator appointed and a candidate for state senate in 2024, what is your biggest your thought on the biggest effort towards shifting that political will? I mean, I see that we're doing all of this work in different areas and from the ground up, but in terms of shifting that political will within Hawaii state legislature, particularly, what should we focus on?
Put money where it's needed most. Fix the prisons, put services in the prisons. You know, why is it women can't have a beauty school inside of WCCC? Why can't they learn cosmetology and come out with a certificate? Why can't they study especially the ones who are up there for fraud and computer cybersecurity issues? They know what they're doing. Train them right so they can then help instead of harm. Whatever skills they already have, and they're highly skilled in many things, it might not have been used legally, but find what it is. They need education. They need more college courses. They need hands-on. They need to know how to use tools. They could be mechanics. They could be construction workers, whatever might float their boat, you know? And I think that's where you say, where those of us who were involved on the ground say to the women, if you could do anything you want, what would it be? And they tell you what they'd want to do. Survey them, get their input, ask them, treat them like they're humans, you know, give them the power that they haven't had previously, and then put the money into those programs. With COVID, all services were terminated. And right now at WCCC, only hula remains because of Melina Kaulakukui, who's so devoted and wonderful. Nothing else is there. No more yoga, no more drama, no more nothing. You know, and it starts from the top down. They want to get rid of the guys who say, wait a minute, something's not right. They don't want whistleblowers. Well, you know what? We need whistleblowers and we need to protect them. And, you know, they've made the movement on rape and made it more difficult. There's still no cameras at WCCC. There's no cameras. The bathrooms don't have doorknobs on them. It's ridiculous. I mean, I could go on and on, but I won't. It's just, there really needs to be a real study done, not by academics, but by us who've been in the trenches and say, here's what the women want. Here's what they really need. Why can't they get sanitary pads? Why do they have to pay $5 for shampoo? Why are they being charged $5 something a minute to call? You know, it's outrageous. It's outrageous. You punish them, they get, all right, so they do something wrong, they get punished. They're in prison, you keep getting punished. You know, they get out, you're still punished. When does the punishment stop? How do you rebuild a person if you keep punishing a person? You know, we're not talking about serial killers here. We're talking about women who've been traumatized. They made a mistake, often in their own ignorance, they made a mistake behind a guy or someone else, you know, and they pay the price and the guy gets away. Saw a lot of that. Anyway, women are very different than men, and the prison system was built for men on chain gangs who murdered people. Well, you know what? We just aren't there anymore. So got to change. It's political will, and it starts at the ledge.